When you're walking on the streets, you're kind of looking at people and sometimes you wonder about somebody's story. And you don't even know why you were looking at that person, but something drew you to that. And I want people to explore that further. So the way I got into photography is actually by accident. I actually had no plans to become a photographer. I had a stressful corporate job and didn't really have much of a life. So actually a coworker suggested, hey, why did you pick up photography? You're always traveling. And so he gave me a camera. I think when it really became more than just a hobby is when I began photographing people on the street. And then I realized, oh, this is not just about photography in terms of making pictures, but connecting with individuals that somehow you gravitate towards. And so I became interested in people's stories, strangers' stories. I was born and raised in Frankfurt, Germany. At that time, Frankfurt had a lot of US troops. And so there's a lot of military installations in the city, casernes, barracks. So I happened to grow up around a lot of black kids that, were the sons and daughters of African-American military families that were stationed in Frankfurt. A lot of German kids just ignored me. And so these were actually the only kids that took an interest in kind of, socializing with me. I noticed from very little on that something was off in my relationship with my father. He was really extremely violent and extremely abusive and calling me names, and he would always make fun of my lips, that they were so big and so huge, and he would always tell me when I go out to school I should tuck in my lips because nobody wanted to see that. That's what he told me. So I became very self-conscious of the way I looked. My mom eventually told me the whole story of the father that I thought was my biological father isn't, and that she had an extramarital affair, and all that she knows is that he was African American. That's all she knows. It was traumatic, but also cathartic because a lot of the things that happened to me as a child started making sense, Most of my friends in Germany, since I was a little child, were black. The majority of them either didn't know their father either or had a terrible relationship with them. I started putting a lot of my street photography on social media. And so a lot of people commented that, there's some themes that are emerging. For instance, a lot of people said, oh, you're photographing a lot of fathers or father-child interactions. I'm like, really? And I went to New York in 2011 to do a workshop. And that's when everything came together. That's when I began actually actively searching for fathers and wanting to do a long-term project.
This is too extra for that box for you. That box is 10.
As I was photographing these fathers, I'm realizing not only are they loving and warm and affectionate to their children, but they're not perfect. None of the fathers are. There's no such thing as a perfect father, and again, that's something the media tries to tell us, that the antidote to the absent black father is some sort of perfect Dr. Cliff Huxtable type of archetype that, can kind of just like make all these problems go away. And there's just no such thing as that. And for me, it was the realization that these fathers just simply try their best. And sometimes it works, and sometimes, they could probably do better, but it doesn't mean that they're not loving. And it's not to excuse what my father did, my fathers. It was more that, maybe that's the best they could do. And it doesn't make it better for me, but, for me it's better just to forgive and move on.
So Zun, How you doing? You alright? Yeah. How's everything?
A lot of people misunderstand what this project was about. I remember a lot of publications saying photographer processes his childhood trauma through photographing fathers that are the opposite of what he experienced. I'm like, no, actually, I was photographing the kinds of African American men that I had in my life. And so that's what I tapped into to create this project, is the many black men that were there for me when it mattered. I mean, they gave me, all the warmth and love and affection that I didn't get at home. And for me, that was important because, it meant that I didn't have a traumatic childhood after all. And black people are not at all what the media tries to tell us, because a lot of black men are actually there for their children, but in ways that the media doesn't want to show. I was photographing father figure, and in that process I was in different cities, and I found literally photos of families, black families, on the street. Initially I thought maybe somebody had just forgotten them or lost them, but I realized no, these are actually photos that were discarded. If you look at the actual images, they're so full of love and pride and joy, and these are not just regular family photos, but they have a very specific context of resistance, of showing something that kind of goes against the stereotype, and the importance of making your own images in response to what's out there. And if you lose those, what does it say about what happened to these families? So it's obviously not something good. And I want to create an archive where at least the notion of resistance is restored and these stories come back to life that way. I think all ways of showing resistance are important. The loud and the intense images of protest, of people in the streets with signs, but there's so much more that also needs to be shown in an equal way. I do one day hope to meet my biological father, so in that sense it's kind of painful to not have more information. So part of my intention to put this work out there is that maybe one day he'll actually find it and then reach out to me, and then we can make that connection. I think love for me is connected to fear. People are afraid these days, and what I would encourage people to do more of is to live less in fear and more in tune with what and who they really are. If you're constantly in a place of fear, then you're not making room for love. So, and that's probably the only advice I have.